we're trying to establish a game that is responsible and sets us up for success. And there's aspects of the game, and a lot of it is decision making and situational play, that can either enhance that or take away from it. The stuff that takes away from it is what we're talking about. And so we try to define that for the guys. You know, I think one of my most important responsibilities as the coach is to define an identity for this group. In other words, what does Rangers hockey look like? What do we want it to look like when we're at our best? And so we've tried to define that for them. And now it's our job to go out and try to work at that and become the team that we think we're capable of becoming. But there are aspects of the game, managing the puck appropriately, changing at the right times, knowing what your responsibilities are away from the puck if we don't have it, whether it be off of a face-off or a neutral zone forecheck or a rush coverage or things of that nature. It's things that I think don't require a lot of talent that we want to be good at all the time. You know, it's things that maybe are easy to do but easier not to do. And so that's what we're trying to define, and it adds up to that phrase.
The puck management stuff. I mean, I know you haven't been here, but it does seem like there's a lot of guys here that's something it's come up a lot repeatedly in the past, where there'll be stretches where it seems like the puck management is pretty clean and they cut down the turnovers, and then it kind of rears its head eventually. So what is your philosophy, I guess, on what needs to happen to kind of get that out of?
Yeah, it's a great question, because my experience has been that the more talented players that you coach, that becomes more of a prevalent discussion. And so, and my philosophy has always been that we don't want to take the sticks out of our best players' hands. I think if we did that, we don't allow them the opportunity to do what they do. That's what separates them from others. So why would I create an environment where they are reluctant to act on their instincts? That's how I feel. But having said that, there's inherent risk in playmaking, right? And so I think my job, and I've had these conversations with our guys already, my job is to define the line in the sand. We don't want to play reckless hockey. We want them to act on their instincts. We want them to play a game with confidence. But there's a fine line. We don't want to play a reckless game because it's hard to win that way. It's my job, I think, to define that line on where that game starts to become reckless. And so, as I said, there's inherent risk in playmaking. When our guys are going to try to make plays, they're going to turn it over sometimes. Some are acceptable, others are not. And we'll define that. And that's the line that I'm talking about.
I'm curious, when you took this job, you were in Pittsburgh for a long time, and when you got that job, it was in the middle of the season. This, you had kind of the full off season to prepare. How much did you watch of last year's film, of this ring?
A fair amount. Yeah. A fair amount. And then having played in the same division for the last 10 years, I feel like, some of the guys that have been here for a long time, the established players, I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on their games. When I was watching film after I took this job, it was really about starting to watch the other guys that I'm not as familiar with, and trying to gain a better grasp of, what these guys are all about and what their strengths are and how potentially we might utilize them moving forward.
Your preseason starts tomorrow, obviously. What do you need to get out of these preseason games? Presumably you're not going to send your A lineup tomorrow, but what do you need to see in this first preseason game from whatever guys might be on the bubble or guys?
So I think the objective of, and every coach in the league will probably say the same thing, right? The objectives of training camp for me it's a parallel objective, right? We want to provide an opportunity for players that are challenging for a roster spot. We want to provide an opportunity for those guys to show what they can do and why they're deserving of making the New York Rangers. At the same side of the coin, the other track, the other objective is we have to get the group ready for game one. So there's always going to be those two parallel objectives that we're trying to balance. And so we're trying to put players in positions where they can play to their strengths. So some of these guys that are challenging for roles on the team, we'll try to give them an opportunity to play those types of roles in the exhibition season. And at the same time, we're trying to get the group ready for game one. You know, when you look at the amount of practices that we have between now and opening night, if you take away the game days, we're down to single-digit practices. And so it's not like, it may seem like it's a long time, but it really isn't. So, you know, we're going to start paring down the group. You know, the first few days we're 3 teams. You know, now we'll break down to 2 teams after tomorrow's exhibition game. And then we'll go from there and we'll start to continue to implement some of the team concept that we've started already. So those are the objectives of training camp, I think, around the league, is we're trying to give guys an opportunity to show what they can do, to challenge for a roster spot, and we're trying to get the team ready for game one.
And how much work do your key guys need? Like, for instance, your goalies, and like how many games or periods or whatever do they need to get ready?
Yeah, we'll talk that through. We already have. We'll talk that through with some of our players, and we'll give them what we think is sufficient games that we think is ideal for them to set them up for success. If you want my opinion, I like to see the established veteran players get into 3 games in a perfect world. If we can get them in 3 games, maybe one of the games we mix the groups and give them a chance to play with some of the younger kids and some of the guys that are challenging for spots. And then as we get closer towards the end of camp, we start to work them into combinations that we might potentially see for game one of opening night.
With Connor Sheary, what was, I guess, kind of the process over the summer, like conversations you had with him, I guess making him feel comfortable being on a PTO rather than having a deal, and what does he, I guess, need to do to earn a contract?
Well, obviously I have familiarity with Connor. He played for me in Pittsburgh. He was on the 2 Stanley Cup teams that we won in Pittsburgh, and he was a big part of those teams. I think Connor just needs to bring the game that he's capable of bringing, and when I think Connor's at his best, he's a terrific puck pursuit guy. He's a dog on a bone on the puck in the offensive zone. He knocks a lot of pucks down. He's got a great stick. He's brave as an undersized guy. He'll go into traffic. He'll play in traffic. He'll go to the net, and he has the ability to finish. He scored 20-plus goals for me in Pittsburgh. He scored 20-plus goals in Washington. When he's been given an opportunity, he's produced. And so, I think he's a guy that could potentially add those elements to our team. He's quick, he's elusive, and he's, he has a conscientious game. He's a decent player away from the puck.
Obviously very different points in their career, but do you see any similarities between him and Brett Berard?
I'm trying to learn Brett's game a little bit more. What I will tell you is that what I have noticed is that Brett brings a lot of energy. He's a buzzsaw out there on the ice, and so he's got a good motor, and I think they're similar in that regard. The other elements I think I'll watch and see, but right away, you can see the energy that Brett brings to the table, and his motor and his ability to get after pucks and things of that nature.
If I could ask you about Rempe, what were your impressions of him as an opposing coach, and how, if at all, might those have changed now that you're his coach?
My impressions of him are probably the same impressions that you have. I mean, I think it's pretty clear on what he brings to the table. He's a big, strong guy. He's an intimidating presence. He sticks up for his teammates. He's tough as nails. We know all that about him. I think what I've learned being his coach is number one, he's a terrific person, and his enthusiasm for the game. He loves to play, loves to be on the ice. He's an enthusiastic learner, which is what the types of players that we like to have. He's eager to learn, and he wants to engage in hockey talk all the time. And so that's what I've learned since I've been his coach that I didn't know, obviously, when you're coaching against him.
Is there any specific reason why you have Laba, Perot, and Berard on the same line, and what have you seen from them as a line together so far?
Are there any specific reason? I mean, there are reasons why we put these guys together. We're trying to see what they're capable of. I think Laba's a guy that we think potentially could, develop into a real solid two-way center iceman. He's got an NHL body. He's strong. He skates well, so he brings good speed, and from what I've seen to this point, he has a two-way game. He has some offense to him. He also has the ability to defend. Perot obviously is a talented player with great offensive instincts, and so he has the ability to make plays. So that was part of it when we put that combination together. But as I said to you guys, I wouldn't read too much into those things. We'll probably change those around.